I was an intersex ginger and white cat raised by the villain. On the day I first turned human, my whole body felt hot, strange, and out of control. I did the only thing a frightened cat could think to do. I climbed into Adrian Cole's bed. After Adrian woke up, everything changed. He stopped chasing Emma Whitaker, the woman the story insisted he was supposed to want. He stopped making trouble for Ryan Hale, the man the story insisted was supposed to win. He even stopped going to parties unless security reports were involved. Instead, he sat in his study with me sprawled across his lap, one hand rubbing my belly while he spoke into his phone in that low, cold voice that made grown men forget how to breathe. "You still haven't found the golden hair trespasser." His thumb moved in slow circles over my stomach. I had been enjoying it. My ears were half flat with comfort. My tail was curled around his wrist. Then his tone dropped. "Useless. A person gets past the cameras, the gates, and the private security team, and none of you can identify them." I went stiff. Adrian leaned back in his leather chair. The Manhattan skyline glowed beyond the study windows, sharp and silver against the night. "If you find that person, bring the matter to legal first. Want every record, every trace, every reason they thought they could walk into my home." The person on the other end said something. Adrian's mouth curved, but it was not a smile. "Pregnant," he repeated. I froze so hard I nearly forgot how to be a cat. "If that's true," Adrian said softly, "then there had better be a doctor involved, and there had better be answers. Anyone who can bypass my entire estate and end up in my bed is not some innocent passerby." My fur rose from nose to tail. I stopped showing him my belly very carefully. I tried to slide off his lap. Adrian caught me with one hand before my paws touched the floor. "Where do you think you're going?" He lifted me back and narrowed his eyes at my slightly rounded stomach. "Marmalade," he said. "Have you been eating too much?" Again, I gave a tiny guilty chirp. He set me on the rug and patted my back. "Fine, go, but back on the treats. I refuse to let you become a furry dump truck." Then he returned to the call. I did not wait to hear more. I ran out of the study, down the hall, and straight into my cat room. That night, I did not want my canned salmon. I did not want freeze-dried cod. I did not even want my favorite chicken lickable treats. I curled inside my cat bed and stared at the wall, with the despair of a creature who had finally understood destiny. Adrian Cole was never going to find the golden-haired intruder, because the one who climbed into his bed that night was me. That night had been my first transformation. I had been separated from my mother when I was little. No one had ever explained that cats like me could change shape. No one told me that. The first change came with a fever so strong it blurred every thought. All I knew was panic. My paws were gone. My fur was gone. The world was too cold against bare skin. Too bright, too loud, too much. So I searched for my person. To everyone else, Adrian Cole was not a good man. He was a villain in a tailored suit, the kind of man whose name made rivals lower their voices. But to me, he was a responsible human. He remembered my food schedule. He knew which toys I liked. He pretended he disliked cat hair, but he still let me sleep on his black coats. When I pawed at the bathroom door, he opened it. When thunder rolled over the estate, he worked with one hand and kept the other on my back. So when my body changed and fear swallowed my senses, I went to him. I climbed onto Adrian's bed with tears in my eyes. Skin without fur touched familiar sheets, and the feeling made me tremble from head to toe. Unfortunately, that was also the night Adrian's own plan turned against him. He had attended a charity gala in Manhattan. He had meant to interfere with Ryan Hale and Emma Whitaker, the hero and heroine whose the story seemed to survive every obstacle Adrian placed in their path. A certain glass of wine had been switched, then switched back. Adrian, who thought he was always 3 steps ahead of everyone, drank it himself. It was not ordinary wine. It came carried something meant to loosen restraint, blur judgment, and make a person's emotions impossible to hide. Adrian understood what had happened immediately. He refused to call anyone. He hated being touched by strangers. He hated losing control. Even more, he believed he only had to endure the night alone. Then I appeared. I remembered very little clearly: moonlight, the smell of Adrian's sheets, his hand gripping my shoulder, not cruelly, but with desperate caution. His voice harsh and strained. "Who sent you?" I was shaking so badly I could barely speak my person. Adrian went still. Then his expression became even more dangerous. By morning, I woke as a cat again. The bed was in disarray. Security had surrounded the Cole estate in layers. Guards were reviewing footage, questioning staff, and searching for a golden-haired woman who had broken into Adrian Cole's private wing. I lay in the middle of the blade, exhausted and miserable. Adrian picked me up by the ribs and frowned. "Of all the places in this house, you chose this bed." I pressed my face into his palm and said nothing. He sent me to the groomer, replaced the sheets, and spent the next 2 weeks tearing through every camera feed, guest list, license plate and security report from Manhattan to Westchester. He stopped pursuing Emma. He stopped provoking Ryan. He devoted himself to finding the stranger from that night. He almost turned all of New York inside out. And still he found no one. Of course, he found no one. The golden-haired stranger had 4 paws again, and was currently asleep inside a heated cat bed. I stretched, yawned, and decided that the next time I transformed, I would simply be more careful. Adrian must never see me as a human again. Lately, I had no appetite. My favorite freeze-dried cod smelled wrong. The salmon pâté made me turn my head away. Even the chicken treats, treasures that once deserved immediate celebration, now look suspicious. Adrian spent his days at Coal Capital, and his nights hunting for the golden-haired intruder. I thought he would not notice. I underestimated him. One evening, he found the treats I had dragged under the sofa, and hidden in a neat little pile. "Marmalade Cole," he said, crouching in front of the sofa. "Am I starving you? Is the kitchen closed? Why are you hoarding food?" Like a tiny landlord, he lifted me under the front legs and weighed me in his hands. His brow furrowed. "How are you eating less and getting heavier?" I avoided eye contact. The truth was, I also knew something was strange. It was not just the appetite. I become clingy. Whenever Adrian was home, I followed him everywhere with my tail high. If he walked from the study to the kitchen, I was there. If he went to shower, I pawed at the glass door. If he left for work, I jumped into his briefcase and tried to become office supplies. There were other changes too. My chest felt tender. My stomach felt full in a way that was not food. Adrian placed me on his lap and brushed my fur. "I'm taking you to the vet tomorrow." I flicked my tail across his wrist, snorted, "Don't give me that attitude. Are you mad? Because I said you were getting round." If Adrian had divided the last pieces of his humanity into 2 halves, one half had once been reserved for Emma Whitaker. The other half belonged to me. Emma had found me first. Back then, Adrian was trying to get close to her. He wore kindness like a well-tailored jacket, and protect ended to be everything she admired. When Emma found a stray ginger and white cat behind a cafe, and worried about where I would go, Adrian smiled and said he loved cats. He was lying. When I first arrived at the Cole estate, he disliked me intensely. He disliked fur. He disliked claw marks. He disliked any living thing that knocked pens off desks, and looked proud. Afterward, he handed me to the housekeeper and told her to manage the situation. But I, Marmalade, refused to accept that any 2-legged creature could resist me. The more Adrian avoided me, the more I insisted on touching him. I rubbed against his ankles. I slept on his shoes. I climbed into his lap during work calls. One day, during a video conference with investors, Adrian finally picked me up, because I would not stop headbutting his knee. On the screen, a dozen executives saw 2 orange ears appear under his chin. Adrian stared at the camera as if daring anyone to comment. No one did. Later, when Adrian's polished mask cracked, and Emma realized what kind of man he truly was, she came to take me back. Adrian tapped his fingers once on his desk. "Your contract terms can be discussed," he said. "Marmalade cannot." Emma blinked. "He was my rescue. He is my cat," Adrian said. "Why would my cat live in your house?" That was when I knew I had won. Now, after brushing me, Adrian trimmed my claws with expert care. When he finished, he looked thoughtful. "Since we're going to the vet, maybe we should schedule the neutering too." This I fell. The walls shook. The universe lost all mercy. I launched myself off his lap and ran like the estate had caught fire. Adrian had believed I was male from the day he brought me home, but I was not that simple. I was an intersex cat. If a vet examined me closely, my secret would be exposed that night. I forced myself to eat a whole bowl of food. Then I played with a ball, so enthusiastically that I nearly rolled under a cabinet. I hoped Adrian would see my excellent health and cancel the vet visit. Later, I carried the ball into his study, jumped onto the desk, and found him searching the internet. "This green-red cat not eating. Tender chest gaining weight. What does it mean?" The first reply suggested stomach trouble and recommended a full veterinary exam. The second suggested bored with food. The third made my entire soul leave my body. Has the poster considered that the cat might be pregnant? I stared at the screen. Adrian frowned and typed quickly, "Impossible. My cat is male. I'll take him to the vet anyway." Then he rose, placed one hand on my back, and gently pinned me on the desk. He looked me over from head to toe. After a moment, a dangerous little smile appeared. "Marmalade," he murmured. "You wouldn't happen to be pregnant, would you?" I froze so completely that my tail went rigid like a bottle brush. I stared at him, my green eyes wide with genuine terror. I let out a pathetic, squeaky little chirp. Adrian stared back. For a long, agonizing second, the study was dead silent. Then he laughed. It was a low, dark sound that vibrated in his chest. He rubbed the spot between my ears. Don't look so horrified, Marmalade. It was a joke. I know exactly what you are. He scooped me up, holding me against his crisp white shirt. But we're still going to the vet tomorrow. I don't like mysteries involving things that belong to me. I spent the rest of the night plotting my escape. I tried the front door, locked with a biometric scanner. I tried the kitchen windows, reinforced glass. I even tried to scale the stone fireplace to hide in the chimney, but my newly rounded, heavy belly threw off my balance, and I slid down onto the Persian rug with a humiliating thump. Adrian, who had been drinking scotch and watching me from the leather armchair, simply took another sip. Are you quite finished? By 9 a.m. the next morning, I was shoved into a product carrier and placed in the back of a black Maybach. The veterinary clinic Adrian used was not a normal clinic. It was a private, painfully sterile facility on the Upper East Side that catered exclusively to the pets of billionaires. Dr. Evans, a balding man who always looked like he was one mistake away from a heart attack when dealing with Adrian, greeted us at the door. Mr. Cole, Dr. Evans said, his voice slightly breathless. Marmalade is looking robust. He's fat, Adrian corrected coldly, placing the carrier on the steel examination table. And lethargic. And his chest is tender. I want a full blood panel, a physical and an ultrasound. Find out what's wrong with him. I was extracted from the carrier. I hissed, swatting at Dr. Evans' gloved hands. Adrian placed 2 fingers firmly on the back of my neck. Instantly, my feline instincts betrayed me. My body went limp, though I grumbled a low growl of protest. Good boy, Adrian murmured. Let's, take a look, Dr. Evans said, visibly sweating under Adrian's intense, unblinking gaze. He ran his hands over my ribs, pressing gently down toward my stomach. He frowned. He pressed again. Mr. Cole, Dr. Evans stammered, pulling his hands back. Well, there seems to be a mass. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Adrian's voice went dangerously quiet. A mass? Are you telling me my cat has a tumor? No, not a tumor. We need the ultrasound immediately. They shaved a rectangular patch of fur off my belly. The indignity of it made me want to cry, but the cold gel they applied was worse. Dr. Evans pressed the wand to my exposed skin. He stared at the monitor. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and sheer panic. Speak, Adrian commanded, a single word sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Cole. Dr. Evans swallowed hard. Marmalade is not. He is not a male. Adrian crossed his arms. I was told he was male when I acquired him. It's rare, but not impossible in felines, especially gingers. Marmalade presents externally as a male, or rather, ambiguously, but internally, Marmalade possesses fully functioning female reproductive organs. Dr. Evans pointed a shaking finger at the screen. And Mr. Cole, she is pregnant. Adrian didn't move. He didn't blink. The silence was so heavy it felt like the walls were closing in. Look here, Dr. Evans babbled, trying to fill the terrifying void. 1, 2, 3. 3 healthy fetuses. Judging by their development, I would place the gestation at exactly 6 weeks. 6 weeks. My heart hammered against my ribs. 6 weeks ago was the charity gala. 6 weeks ago was the night of the spiked wine, the fever, the transformation. I looked up at Adrian. His face was a perfect, emotionless mask. But I knew him. I knew the micro-expressions of Adrian Cole better than I knew myself. I saw the slight tightening of his jaw. I saw his dark eyes flick from the monitor to me, and then I saw the exact moment the gears in his genius, paranoid, villainous brain locked into place. 6 weeks. The golden-haired intruder. The locked estate. The complete lack of security footage of anyone entering or leaving. The strange, desperate girl shaking in his bed who smelled exactly like. Adrian looked down at me. His gaze felt like a physical weight. Are you certain? Adrian asked, his voice softer than velvet. Absolutely, Mr. Cole. Wrap her up, Adrian said. He didn't say another word. He didn't ask about diet. He didn't ask about birth. He just picked up the product carrier, shoved me inside, and walked out of the clinic. The car ride home was a nightmare. Adrian sat in the back with the carrier on his lap. He didn't open the mesh to pet me. He didn't look out the window. He just stared at the carrier, his mind working with terrifying speed. When we got back to the estate, he bypassed the housekeeper. He carried me straight to his study, locked the heavy oak doors, and unzipped the bag. I climbed out, my shaved belly brushing against the cold mahogany of his desk. I tried to act normal. I gave a small meow and pushed my head against his hand. Adrian didn't pet me. He leaned over the desk, bracing his hands on either side of me, trapping me in a shadow. A golden-haired woman, he whispered, his eyes dark and chaotic. A woman who bypassed a $20 million security system. A woman who left no fingerprints, no digital footprint. A woman who vanished into thin air. I flattened my ears, pretending to be very interested in a stray pen. And now, Adrian continued, leaning in until his nose almost touched mine. My intersex cat, who is the run of the estate, who sleeps in my bed, is exactly 6 weeks pregnant. He reached out and traced the contour of my ear. I shivered. Do you know what I do to people who play games with me, Marmalade? He asked softly. I bolted. I scrambled off the desk, my claws tearing a scratch into the polished wood, and sprinted for the door. I threw myself against it, pawing frantically at the gap at the bottom. You can't leave, Adrian said. He didn't chase me. He just sat back in his leather chair. I canceled my meetings for the week. The estate is on complete lockdown. No one comes in. No one goes out. If I am losing my mind, I will find out soon enough. But if I am right, his voice dropped to a gravelly, possessive register. Then you have nowhere to run. For 3 days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Adrian didn't sleep. He watched me. If I ate, he watched. If I slept, he watched. He brought his meals into the study and forced me to stay in the room with him. The stress, combined with the rapidly progressing pregnancy, was a disaster for my magic. The transformations were triggered by intense emotional spikes or physical fever. By the evening of the 3rd day, my body began to burn. It started as a deep ache in my bones. I was lying on the rug near the fireplace when the heat flared. I gasped, a distinctly human sound, and curled into a tight ball. My fur felt like needles. Adrian stood up instantly. Marmalade? Panic blinded me. I couldn't do this here. Not in front of him. I scrambled to my paws, stumbling like a drunkard, and threw myself toward the narrow gap behind the heavy velvet curtains. Marmalade, stop. I didn't stop. The pain peaked, blindingly white. My bones snapped and elongated. Fur retreated into skin. The world expanded, terrifyingly large and cold. I crashed against the window pane, no longer a tiny ginger cat, but a naked, gasping woman with messy golden-orange hair, clutching my visibly rounded stomach. I collapsed onto the floor, shivering violently, trying to pull the curtains around my bare body. Footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. The curtain was ripped back. Adrian stood there. The dim light from the Manhattan skyline cast sharp shadows across his face. He didn't gasp. He didn't recoil in horror. He simply stood there, staring down at me, his chest heaving as if he had just run a marathon. I pressed my back against the glass, my knees pulled up, trembling uncontrollably. Adrian. I choked out. My human voice was raspy and used. His eyes swept over me. They took in my golden hair, the pale skin, and finally, the undeniable curve of my pregnant stomach. Slowly, Adrian dropped to his knees. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over my shivering shoulders. The scent of his cedar and bergamot cologne enveloped me, making my cat instincts purr even as my human mind panicked. I am a rational man, Adrian whispered, his hands gripping my shoulders so tightly it almost bruised. I build companies. I destroy rivals. I deal in numbers and facts. For 6 weeks, I thought I was going insane. I'm sorry, I sobbed, shrinking into his jacket. I didn't mean to. I didn't know how to tell you. Shut up, he commanded, but there was no cruelty in it. Only a raw, desperate intensity. He reached out, his hand trembling, Adrian Cole, trembling, and pressed his palm flat against my swollen stomach. At his touch, a flutter moved beneath my skin. His breath hitched. My cat, Adrian said, his voice cracking. A terrifying, beautiful smile spread across his face. My goddamn cat. He didn't call the scientists. He didn't call an exorcist. He did what Adrian Cole always did when he found something rare and priceless. He hoarded it. He scooped me up into his arms. I instinctively buried my face in his neck, my hands clutching his shirt. He carried me out of the study, past the shocked portraits in the hallway, and straight into his master bedroom, the very room where this had all begun. He laid me on the bed, pulling the thick down comforter over me. I'm going to get you a glass of water, he said, his voice returning to its usual cold authority, though his eyes were wild. Do not move. If you try to run, I will lock every door in this house and keep you in a cage of pure gold. Do you understand me? I nodded frantically, my golden hair fanning over his pillows. When he returned, he brought water, a plate of expensive cured meats, which I immediately began devouring with zero human table manners, and one of his oversized cashmere sweaters. As I sat cross-legged on the bed, wearing his sweater and eating prosciutto with my hands, Adrian sat in the armchair opposite me. He watched me with a dark, burning fascination. Explain, he demanded. Between bites, I told him. I explained my memories as a kitten, the sudden feverish shifts I couldn't control, and how the magic was tied to my emotions and health. I explained how, on the night of the gala, the fever had overwhelmed me, and my only instinct was to seek out the one person who made me feel safe. Safe. Adrian repeated the word as if it tasted strange. Everyone in this city thinks I am a monster. Emma Whitaker thinks I am the devil incarnate. Emma is an idiot. I said around a piece of meat. She doesn't know you. You remember my feeding schedule. You let me sleep on your keyboard. Adrian let out a breathless, disbelieving laugh. He dragged a hand down his face. I turned New York inside out looking for a corporate spy, an assassin, a femme fatale. And it was a cat who wanted chin scratches. He stood up, crossed the room, and sat on the edge of the bed. He reached out and tucked a strand of orange hair behind my ear. His thumb lingered on my cheek. Can you shift back? He asked. I don't think so, I admitted, looking down at my stomach. The magic feels heavy right now. I think I'm stuck like this until the babies come. Adrian's eyes darkened at the mention of the babies. His gaze dropped to my stomach, then back to my face. Good. I prefer you where I can talk to you. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a murmur. You belong to me, Marmalade. In fur or in skin. You don't leave this room. You don't leave me. Understood? I don't want to leave, I murmured, leaning into his hand. My eyes slipped half shut. Just buy the good salmon, not the cheap stuff. Over the next 3 months, Adrian Cole disappeared from the public eye. The business world went into a frenzy. Stocks fluctuated. Rumors spread that the ruthless CEO of Cole Capital had fallen deathly ill, or that he was orchestrating a massive, covert hostile takeover. In reality, the villain of the story was spending his days sitting in his bed, reading books on supernatural pregnancies, and letting me use his lap as a pillow. Adjusting to a permanent human form was difficult. I still had cat instincts. When Adrian's phone rang unexpectedly, I would hiss and dive under the covers. When he brought me food, I would occasionally try to rub my face against his arm to mark him as mine. Instead of being repulsed, Adrian found it intensely satisfying. His possessive nature thrived on my total dependence. He bought me wardrobes of silk and cashmere that I refused to wear, preferring his old t-shirts because they smelled like him. He fired half his staff to ensure absolute privacy, keeping only a deaf housekeeper and a personal, discreet doctor who was paid enough to never ask questions about my lack of ID or my occasional purring. But the story Adrian was meant to be a part of was not done with him. Emma Whitaker and Ryan Hale, the supposed heroes of the world, could not leave well enough alone. Ryan, fueled by his righteous protagonist energy, was convinced Adrian was plotting something terrible in his isolation. I was 8 months pregnant, massive, and highly irritable, lying on the sofa in the grand living room when the security alarms went off. Adrian, who had been reading a quarterly report while absent-mindedly rubbing my feet, snapped to attention. He pulled out his phone. Breach at the front gates. Did they bring treats? I asked sleepily. No, Adrian said, his voice turning icy. He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. It's Hale. And Emma. My ears, metaphorically, flattened. I hated Emma. She was the one who had tried to take me away from Adrian. I'll handle them, Adrian said, his eyes hard. Stay here. He walked out into the foyer. I, of course, did not stay. I waddled out of the living room and hid behind the massive marble staircase, peering out just as the front doors were forced open by Ryan Hale, flanked by 2 private investigators. Emma was right behind them, looking morally outraged. Cole, Ryan shouted. We know what you're doing. We know you're hiding offshore assets, and we have a warrant. You have a death wish, Adrian interrupted softly. He stood at the center of the foyer, radiating an aura of such pure, villainous menace that even Ryan took a step back. You have broken into my home. Give me one reason I shouldn't have my security snap your legs. Adrian, please, Emma stepped forward, using her soft, pleading voice. We don't want to fight. Just tell us the truth. Why have you vanished? What are you hiding in this house? None of your business, Adrian sneered. We're searching the premises, Ryan declared, motioning for his investigators to move. Adrian's hand drifted toward the inside of his jacket. I knew that look. He was about to do something that would send him to federal prison. My feral instincts flared. Nobody threatened my human. Nobody ruined my quiet, warm life. Before Adrian could draw his weapon, I stepped out from behind the staircase. If you take one more step, I will bite your face off, I snarled. The entire foyer froze. Ryan, Emma, and the investigators stared at me. I was a sight, heavily pregnant, wearing nothing but Adrian's oversized black button-down shirt, my messy orange hair wild around my face, my green eyes narrowed into slits. Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Adrian, you're keeping a pregnant woman hostage? Adrian's murderous rage vanished, replaced by sheer panic. He crossed the foyer in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around me, shielding my body from their view. Marmalade, I told you to stay on the sofa. They were yelling at you. I grumbled, burying my face in his chest. Make them leave. They smell like cheap righteousness and bad perfume. Marmalade? Emma whispered, her eyes widening in horrific realization. Like the cat. She's delirious, Ryan said, disgusted. Cole, who is this woman? Adrian turned his head just enough to look at them. The villainous mask was gone, replaced by the terrifying ferocity of a protective father and mate. This woman, Adrian said, his voice echoing in the grand hall, is my fiancée. She is pregnant with my children. And if you ever step foot on my property again and upset her, I will not just ruin your companies, Ryan. I will erase your bloodline from the face of the earth. Get out. The sheer, venomous conviction in his voice was enough. Ryan paled. Emma looked like she was going to faint. Without another word, they backed out the door and ran. Adrian immediately locked the door and turned his full attention back to me. Are you hurt? Did the stress trigger anything? I'm fine, I said, stretching my back. But I think my water just broke. Adrian Cole, the most feared man in Manhattan, dropped to his knees on the marble floor and yelled for the doctor. The birth was chaotic, loud, and entirely human. 12 hours later, I lay exhausted in the master bed. The room smelled of antiseptic and lavender. Adrian was sitting beside me. He looked like he had been through a war. His tie was gone, his shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his usually perfect hair was a mess. In his arms, wrapped in incredibly expensive cashmere blankets, were a boy and a girl. They looked perfectly human, except for the very distinct, thick tufts of bright ginger hair on their heads. Adrian stared down at them with a look of such profound, overwhelming devotion that it made my heart ache. The villain who had tried to control the city, who had plotted to ruin lives for sport, was completely, utterly conquered by 2 infants and a former street cat. He leaned over and placed the baby girl next to me, then kissed my forehead. His lips lingered against my skin. You did perfectly, he whispered. Are they? I hesitated. Can they shift? I don't care, Adrian said fiercely. If they have fur, I'll buy them scratching posts made of solid gold. If they're human, I'll buy them the world. It doesn't matter. He stroked my cheek, his dark eyes meeting my green ones. The story is over, Marmalade, he said softly. Let the heroes have their cheap little victories outside these walls. They can have the world. I have everything I want right here. I smiled, my eyes drifting shut as the warmth of the bed and his presence washed over me. I let out a deep, rumbling purr, vibrating in my chest. Adrian chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. He shifted closer, pulling me and the babies into his embrace, wrapping his arms around his strange, perfect family. I had been an intersex cat raised by the villain. But as I fell asleep to the sound of his steady heartbeat, I knew the truth. He wasn't a villain at all. He was just my human, and I had trained him perfectly